Hey guys,
Hey.
Welcome to our Fluff discussion on concerning the new 40k rulebook information.
For it has arrived.
Yeah, a little late, I know, but yep. So, let's start this off by prefacing. A lot of what is in here is just rehashing of old stuff, which makes sense because for a lot of people, especially anyone getting into 40k, this will be their first look into what the universe is about, and they still have to include all the old stuff, and, like including the heresy, who the emperor is, etc.
All of that background information that you and I are familiar with.
Yeah. So a lot of the, I would say a good half of the fluff stuff is that.
A good half, I think a good 2/3, personally.
I don't know, somewhere. But a lot of the rest of the book is sort of little blurbs about the armies.
Including all of the, not just the Imperium armies, but also Xenos and Chaos.
And demons and all that, yeah. So, realistically, we only got about, I would say, 23 pages of new information.
Yeah, I think about that.
If that. So, this video probably won't be as long as I think we were expecting it to be, and I think some of you guys were, but, we'll go over the new information that we have and kind of talk about some of the potential.
And pretty much all this information, when we mean by new, we mean like post Cadia, I believe.
Yeah.
Is where it comes in.
Well,
and,
specifically post Primaris. Or, post Rise of Primarch.
Yeah. So my man Roboot.
Roboot, yeah. We had numerous people complain about our pronunciations.
Specifically my pronunciation.
No, specific. I don't know. They didn't like either any of our pronunciations. So we're just going to refer to him as Roboot because that is the only one that there seems to be a definitive decision on. So, anyways, we're starting from basically where the Cicatrix Maledictum, which is the massive scar kind of going across the universe now.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's, does that impact with the Astronomicon or?
Yeah.
Doesn't show.
So whenever this basically new massive galaxy spanning warp rift kind of appears, the Astronomicon is no longer visible like anywhere. Massive warp storms happen all over the place. Ships are destroyed or put like massively off course, appearing like on the far side of the galaxy.
Astropaths who try to look into it die.
Yeah, like the warp storms would like displace some of the defense stations. They would literally, a defense station on the far east might appear in the far west of the galaxy.
It's a mess.
Yeah, basically the entire Imperium is thrown into chaos. There's no ability to communicate. There is some timeline issues with the book. It's hard to tell exactly how much time has passed.
It's a little vague on those kinds of details. We don't know when any of this is occurring.
The nearest we can tell is it seems like the current edition is now roughly 200 to 300 years after Rise of the Primarch. Something to that effect.
Something like that.
And yeah, so that's about the best we can tell. But anyways, during all these warp storms, there's no communication whatsoever. You can't travel, you can't do anything, and essentially, pretty much every single Imperial world is under a threat of some form or another, and they're all just trying to hold out.
Yes.
So during this time, the Legion of the Damned basically goes into overtime.
Oh yeah, just appearing wherever it can to help out and fight back the enemy quite successfully before vanishing.
Right. Surprisingly enough, the Imperium doesn't lose as much as you might expect during this time. They still lose a lot. Don't get me wrong. But the Legion of the
thanks to the Legion of the Damned.
Yeah, the Legion of the Damned just starts appearing everywhere and just saving all sorts of planets that really should have been doomed. So Legion of the Damned is definitely to thank for the Imperium right now.
I would like. Are there like models?
Yeah, there's models.
Okay, because they sound really cool.
Yeah. So The next thing to talk about is during this, as you guys might know, Armageddon has been under siege by the orcs for a long time. Well, now corn demons have essentially decided to show up as well. In fact,
Third party appears.
I don't even know if it's just, I don't think it's just corn. I just think there's demons
It
there.
essentially becomes like a demon. Half of it becomes like demon infested,
Yeah,
essentially.
it describes half of Armageddon now as a demon world.
And it's gone so bad that once in a while, orcs and human would go and look at each other and go, I think this is a problem.
Yeah. The orcs and Imperium are actually working together occasionally because the demon problem is so bad. So, whenever the Imperium is actually working with the orcs and the orcs are actually willing to work with the Imperium,
Shit's
you
gone down.
know things have gone bad. Other interesting thing during the whole cicatrix maledictum being formed, psyker issues. Specifically,
Cycles
okay.
are super controlled, right?
Right. So generally,
massive population control of them.
yeah, you generally have the black ships and whatnot, coming and picking them up. But there's no travel, which means all psychers are literally just
Being born
and continuing and like being hauled off. They're essentially during this time, like there's rampant psychers, and it's even worse at the end of the cicatrix forming because now it's not impossible to travel to the other side because there's kind of gaps in it, but
slow gaps, yeah, short gaps.
But whenever the light of the Astronomicon actually does return, they are able to sort of traverse some of these gaps. But the ones on the dark, what becomes known as the Dark Imperium, basically, they call it the Nihilus or Imperium Nihilus.
Mm-hmm.
Nihilus. I don't know. Someone will
Nihilus.
correct me. That
I'm sure it's Nihilus or something.
I don't care.
Nietzsche, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know the word. Like, if you're talking about like someone who practices, so that'd be like a nihilist. But I don't know how you pronounce it in terms of this case.
In any case, it's dark and it's bad.
Yeah. Basically, just kind of means the Dark Imperium, essentially.
Yeah.
So, basically, on that side of the Imperium, or on that side of the cicatrix, you do not have the light of the Astronomicon anymore. And as a result, so you don't have the black ships coming and picking up the psychers. So they don't really go into too much more detail past that, but it seems to sort of set the stage for some potential problems, you might say.
Yeah. Well,
because psychers are, they're problematic.
Yeah, specifically mentioned, if we were to go back, and part of the fluff does, and I know this is more 7th edition, but if we were to go back, they did mention in the timeline how planets that did have a pretty strict governing policy on psychers were the ones who tend to live longer, while planets who did not were the ones who kind of die. So I think they kind of left that open as a way to guess that perhaps history is going to repeat because now the planet has to self-govern the population of psychers.
Correct. So, anyways, we're continuing to, we've kind of divided our breakdown into 3 sections. So that's sort of our initial section of what's going on whenever the maledictum is forming. And next we're going to talk about sort of after everything's formed, the warp storms start to finally
die down
a bit. I mean, they're still problematic, but after all the warp storms have sort of died down, well, I guess we can go back. We're sort of covered in the war zones, anyways.
Yeah.
So we will end up coming back to whenever it was forming, but as far as the Imperium is concerned, like that's kind of the major implications. So next up, let's see. So the big occurrence, essentially, or big implication for the Imperium is now, instead of what the major thoroughfare for chaos to take used to be the Eye of Storm. Not Eye of the Storm, was it? Oh my god, whatever. The Eye, basically. Eye of Terror.
The Eye of Terror,
there
it
we go.
is. I was going to say the Evil Eye, but that's not correct either.
Yeah, so the Eye, essentially what used to be the Eye of Terror where Acadia was. Now, however, this massive rift is essentially rent the galaxy in two. And because of that, now pretty much any Imperial world is subject to potential invasion. And that includes Terra. In fact, Terra does get attacked.
Several. Yeah.
Just one specific
time.
time. Khorne decides to send 88 of his best demon lords to attack Terra, and Roboute happens to be on Terra at the time and leads the Custodes, the new Primaris Marines, Sisters, and the other, Militarum Defenders and things like that. And they end up defeating it without... It didn't sound like too much of a problem, just because, you gotta imagine Terra's ridiculously defended, but...
But the implications of it cause unrest,
because
that means that Terra can be attacked.
Yeah, the High Lords of Terra are not happy, because that means they are now potentially an invasion target. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what world, it is now open to potential Chaos invasion, which... Like I said, that is very problematic if you're the Imperium. Now you have to spread your defenses very thin.
Exactly, and they do go over quite a few worlds, which did fall.
Yeah. Specifically, we will... Let's see. We're going to kind of talk about... There's a couple gaps in the Cicatrix Maledictum. You can sort of weave in between the gaps in some places. Specifically, there's one near where the Eye of Terror was, and they use that... I'll come to that here in a sec, but they do use that one specifically, and they mention that. As to worlds that fell, though, lots of Imperium worlds fell. They don't go into numbers. They just say, lots. Including, however, other things that are important that are missing or destroyed. A bit less than half the 1,000 chapters are unaccounted for currently.
For the Space Marines.
For the Marines.
And
so a little bit less than 500 chapters are not accounted for.
12 chapter planets are gone.
Including, let's see, the only chapter that's mentioned specifically as being destroyed is the Sky Sentinels. And then 12 chapter worlds, as Alian just mentioned, were destroyed. And the White Consuls, they're mentioned as having their world destroyed.
They escaped, but their world is gone.
Yeah. They are not... The chapter still exists, but they no longer have a chapter world.
They are homeless.
Yeah. So that'll bring us to Baal? Yeah, Baal. And the Blood Angels. Yeah. So anyone who's looked at that map, has seen the map, Baal is on the other side of the Cicatrix Maledictum, and anyone who remember what's been going on to the Blood Angels, they've been under a massive siege by the Tyranids, and they haven't been doing so hot.
Leviathan, I believe.
Yeah, and
been the main one mentioned of the High Fleet.
They have not been doing so hot against it. So they kind of go into more detail. Basically, the Blood Angels are kind of on their last legs. They've called for help from all the... This is before the Cicatrix Maledictum formed. They called for help from all their successor chapters, most of which answered the call. However, they've been definitely fighting a losing battle, and essentially, just as this... like a massive warp storm forms, essentially... it looks like the Blood Angels are, in fact, going to die. However, the warp storm engulfs the Tyranid High Fleet that's in space above them. Well, however, there's still a ton of Tyranids that are already on Baal, and as a result, it's more than enough to defeat the Blood Angels, as it says. And so the Blood Angels are kind of fighting like guerrilla tactics, hit and run, and try to just buy time, I guess. And anyways, the warp storm clears eventually, and there is no more High Fleet. The High Fleet is gone. However, in its place now is Roboute. He has brought the Primaris Marines and his Indominus Crusade by using that gap near the Eye of the Storm
to make it there and bring reinforcements.
Right. So they land, they defeat, they finish off the Tyranids, and then the Blood Angels go into a rebuilding phase, as the book says. So they're sort of going back into rebuilding and recruiting.
There's hope for the Blood Angels.
Yep. Any of the successor chapters, though, have basically been pulled away to, be elsewhere. As far as what happened to the Tyranid High Fleet, basically Korn happened to it. Korn decided to, or specifically Banda Ka, I think, is the supposedly a big arch nemesis of the Blood Angels. Basically piled skulls of Tyranids impossibly high, as the book, in the book's words, in his symbol on one of the moons of Baal, basically saying, "Oh yeah, yep, they're my kill. You can't have them, but I'm going to kill all these Tyranids for you, just so you know I could have beat you."
Yeah, just I guess as a sign.
Yeah, just to basically, I'm watching you type thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. In any case, that's what
They're all
happened.
gone.
The High Fleet is dead. Or whisked away to somewhere else that we don't know about via the warp. We don't know.
They vanished.
Yeah, it's gone, basically. So that's kind of what happened with Baal. I don't think that there's anything else to talk about specifically as far as the Imperium after. Like we said, we have the Dark Imperium, which is the normal Imperium. The normal Imperium has the Astronomicon, so they can still travel around pretty easily.
I think there was also mention, I'm not sure on what part of the timeline, I think probably early on, there was the Plague Marines and...
Oh, yeah. Well, Death Guard. The Death Guard essentially come in. That we're going to cover that
more in the
War Zone section here. But, yeah, but essentially all the demon, your Tzeentch, Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle,
all of them.
They all make a play for some section of real space to sort of stake their claim. And we're going to get into that here in the War Zone section, because that's what most of these are going to deal with. But as far as the actual book talking about things, they talk about the start of the Indomitus. They talk about the fact that the Imperium is in fact to grow again.
Yeah, there is hope amongst the grim darkness.
Yeah. So we're jumping to... I think you went too far.
I went too far.
Right here.
There.
Oh wait, no, it's not Stygius. It's this one.
The March of Plagues, that's right.
This one right here.
Which is the war zone of Ultramar.
Yep. So basically, Nurgle kind of sees Ultramar as being this sort of the gem of the Imperium, and he wants nothing more than to make that his, because that's the way Nurgle is.
All the gardens.
Right.
All the beauty.
Right. So, to that end, he sends essentially Typhus, Mortarion, and who was the other one?
I cannot recall.
It was a greater demon. I just cannot think of his name. We'll see it here in a sec. Hold on. Go ahead.
We're just quickly perusing through when we're describing this war zone. Essentially, the hope here for Nurgle is to, as mentioned, use a lot of these beautiful planets to grow more and more wonderful creations.
Kugath.
Plagues. Kugath.
Kugath Plaguefather is apparently a great unclean one, and he was the other one heading this invasion. They don't really go into any details as far as what Typhus is up to, but they do cover on Kugath and Mortarion. So, basically, the invasion kind of starts with these three systems that sort of form the triangle Nurgle symbol. And, Nurgle's like, I want that. So he grabs that, and that's sort of, they become what's known as the Scourge Stars.
Yes.
Basically become sort of a bastion of disease and...
Plagues.
And as well as sort of a stronghold from where to launch their invasion into Ultramar.
Yeah.
So initially what happens is they invade Ultramar with the Death Guard and the demons and all that, and they actually gain quite a bit of ground. However, Roboot arrives at some point during this, and they sort of bring this to becoming something of a stalemate, and then Roboot starts to get more reinforcements from Forge Worlds and, the successor chapters of the Ultramarines, like the Nova Marines, etc.
Yeah.
And they all arrive, and they start sort of slowly pushing back, but it's still pretty much a deadlock. So Macrog is more or less untouched. It gets a couple...
It gets a few hits, I think.
Right. They kind of launch a couple minor attempts to take it down, but they don't really get much success. More specifically, they seem to target Espendor and EX.
EX especially got hit a lot.
Or IX, EX, I don't know. Whatever it is.
AX.
In any case, so specifically on... hold on. Da-da-da. No, go ahead. Oh, goodness. Why can't I... hold on.
Even before they keep mentioning more of IX.
Oh, goodness. I'm trying to find the stupid... okay. And Parmenio. That's what I was thinking of. Trying to find. Parmenio becomes the site of a very major Titan and armor battle, essentially. Roboot initially concentrates his efforts there. There he actually ends up fighting the lieutenant of Kugath's army and defeats him. Mm-hmm. And so they end up kind of getting a win over there. During this time, Mortarion has focused his efforts on IX or EX or whatever. And has been, making a push there. Once Roboot succeeds and wins that kind of massive armor and Titan battle, he goes over to try to help EX out. And while they're there, they kind of end up fighting to a standstill, and this includes Roboot fighting Mortarion in a one-on-one combat, but neither one seems to be able to gain the upper hand. However, as this fight's going on, Mortarion and the Death Guard withdraw because their plague star or plague stupid name.
The Scourge
Stars.
Yeah, the Scourge Stars.
Their Scourge Stars come under attack. Specifically, what's going on is a lot of infighting between the Chaos Gods because all the Chaos Gods want to claim.
They want a piece of the pie.
Yeah, they all want to claim part of the real space, and you could say Tzeentch and Khorne are kind of jealous of what Nurgle has done, and they're like, well, we're gonna put you in your place. So in any case, basically there's a lot of infighting between the
and Slaanesh is kind of just playing each Chaos God.
The Chaos Gods, yeah.
Slaanesh is not really trying as hard. He's more like just being a dick.
That's kind of what Slaanesh does. That's kind of what goes on in Ultramar. They end up sort of winning, I guess,
mostly because Chaos.
Because Chaos infighting, and they end up sort of having to deal with that. Next, we go to the Cadian system, and as well as Bellis, Corona, and Agrippina. So, Cadia, obviously, Cadia's gone.
Yeah, we went over that.
Right. So, however, the other systems in Cadia in the Cadian area have continued to fight on. Specifically, Bellis, Corona, and Agrippina have put up a pretty substantial fight and have actually succeeded in beating back the forces of Chaos. Mm-hmm. So there's still, sort of two systems right on the border of the Eye of Terror. There's not a ton to talk about here specifically. The main reasoning is the Chaos forces again start infighting because they beat Cadia. Then they start fighting each other over the spoils that they haven't really won yet, and the Cadian and the Bellis, Corona, and Agrippina defenders basically start taking advantage
to push them back.
Right, and they eventually sort of push them out. So that's right. So it's not a lot to talk about in this specific war zone. There's nothing that interesting that seems to occur, other than the fact that the Imperium still has two
systems near the Eye of Terror. Right.
We're getting to Warzone Stygius. What makes this, I guess, of import is it's the Mordian it's the place where all the Mordian Guard come from. Mm-hmm. Zinch is the one who decides to say he wants this because it's apparently a cluster of 99 stars. So,
Zinch.
yeah, he's got his, 9 fetish, basically. In any case, Zinch strikes pretty hard and quick during the formation in the Cicatrix Maledictum. And essentially, of the 9 target systems, he takes 7 quite quickly. However, the Mordian system and the where is it? It's Mordian somewhere.
Kobash?
What?
Or Dobaj? Or Prismata?
I don't know. It's one of those two.
One of these 2 systems.
I just don't know which one it should say.
This is the major clashes on Dobash with the Thousand Suns and Space Wolves.
So Dobash and Mordian. So basically the Dobash system and Mordian system essentially kind of hold out against this long enough for the formation to be finished and them to be able to get cries for help out. The Imperium basically put together a rather rushed crusade essentially to try to save these systems. And while they do succeed at bringing this fight to a stalemate, the army is not exactly big enough to really do much.
No.
So they can't really do anything but, reinforce the defenders and stop the bleeding. Included in this army specifically, there are some Space Wolves, Iron Hands, Dark Angels, there's some Sisters of Silence, some Grey Knights.
Sisters of Silence is all over here.
Right. Oh, we forgot to mention that. The Custodes, we should have mentioned this after the thing was formed. The Custodes are now, instead of just being held specifically on, Terra, they're now actually have an army that's being pushed out into the galaxy. And to that end specifically, I think it's relatively likely that you might see some Games Workshop fleshing out of the Custodes.
I like me some Sisters of Silence.
And possibly Sisters, although they do mention the Sisters is not a full-fledged army, whereas it sounds like the Custodes is truly an army.
Yeah.
And we kind of also, while I'm thinking about this before we continue to Stygius, we also forgot to mention there's sort of a blacked out section, and this has kind of been all over the net, so I'm sure you guys have probably seen it, where it says classified, and the only things you can really read are the final 5 words, which says Master of Mankind dead. And this is essentially in the same sense. This is this paragraph that talks about the Custodes being sent into the galaxy as an army. I think it's very unlikely that it's saying that the Emperor is dead. I mean, technically, if you really want to be brutal about it, the Emperor is dead. It's just his will, essentially, that's keeping
his soul lives on, devouring other souls.
However, if you wouldn't say Master of Mankind dead, you would say the Master of Mankind is dead, or has something to that effect. There's a word missing to make that make sense.
Yeah.
I think more than likely it's something to the effect of the Custodes were, marshaled and sent forth into the galaxy and to fight the foes that would see the Master of Mankind dead. Right. That would something like that would make more sense in terms of wording. But I did want to touch on that because that's something I think that has been floating around the net. Obviously, Games Workshop seems to be trying to tease that he might be dead, but
I doubt it.
it doesn't make sense to me either. So, coming back to Stygius, essentially Ulthwé also shows up because this is right next to the Eye of Terror. Ulthwé shows up, lends their hand, and basically saves the rushed crusade from failing completely and allows them to come into a stalemate. So,
Elder to the rescue again.
Yeah, pretty much.
Elder here to save the day.
Stygius kind of is left in that sort of state where, Zinch has done a lot, but essentially.
Not enough to take it yet.
Yeah. It seems to have sort of been stalemated by a lot of different Imperium troops as well, the Mordians, as well as, all those different chapters I just listed, and more. I didn't even list like all the smaller chapters. There's also the Brazen Claws, Angels of Vengeance, Consecrators. Yeah.
All those people.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Moving on.
Yeah, so we move on. This is the Blood Crusade part, as well as I think this is the
last one.
So whenever the Cicatrix was forming and all the warp storms were really going across the galaxy, essentially Khorne was like, let's go kill people. So
that's Khorne, though.
Yeah, it's
I
Khorne.
mean, that's kind of what he does.
So essentially, his demons just sort of rode the waves of, the warp tide, and just they would appear on, planets for as little as like an hour, just to kill as many people as possible, and then like ride the warp storm as it passed through. Basically they just kind of like rode the waves of bloody vengeance, essentially, and killed a bunch of lots and lots of people apparently. But the only places they kind of stayed and tried to fight and actually met resistance, specifically against Gazgul for the orcs, and against High Fleet Leviathan.
Yeah, which mentioned like Baal and Armageddon, essentially.
Yeah. So, that's kind of what happened with Khorne. There's not too much more to say. They hit a lot of different systems, caused a lot of death, and it was Khorne.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Fair enough.
So with that, there's kind of like three smaller. Well, I say two smaller and one kind of. Well, there's three small blurbs. As far as the size of the battles, that's probably debatable. But the three blurbs are about Craftworld Eandon, and specifically there, Slaanesh targets that, led by Inkisha, Keeper of Secrets for Slaanesh. And more or less, it sounds like Eandon would have fallen. However, a pretty large, odd conglomeration of Eldar showed up, and it didn't sound like it was Inari.
No.
It was,
didn't mention anything.
basically Dark Eldar, Corsairs, Harlequins, Exodite, and Inari all showed up.
Okay.
So including Exodites all show up and basically save Eandon, and then they all kind of go their separate ways. But that's literally the entire blurb. There's a little bit more, but that's the bulk of it. It talks about Armageddon. We've actually already hit on Armageddon, so I don't really have too much.
I don't think there's anything to add.
Yeah, there's nothing actually added here. So this blurb is, I don't know, it's almost a rehash of what it talks about earlier in Armageddon. In fact, it gives Armageddon more information earlier. And then the War in the Rift, which is essentially a civil war between the Chaos Gods. It sounds like it's already sort of been solved, but it doesn't give you the outcome. Basically, just like I said before, Tzeentch and Khorne. Part of what stops the Khorne from sending his minions all over is because Tzeentch is like, hey, look what Nurgle's doing. Let's stop him. And Khorne's like, kill!
I'll do that.
Yeah, so they basically target the Scourge Stars, and it causes Nurgle to recall his people from Ultramar.
Yeah.
So basically, Tzeentch and Khorne sort of ally against Nurgle, trying to, attack the Scourge Stars. Slaanesh, sort of, as it says, he ended up being allying with all sides at some point during the Civil War, but it doesn't really go into a lot of information. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me if we got some sort of, demons book concerning this War in the Rift.
Probably they would go into more
on.
detail there.
But basically it ends whenever they all end up sort of agreeing to Tzeentch's proposal to settle the war via a contest of champions. So it doesn't tell you
what the contest entails.
And it doesn't tell you the result. It just says that is the last line of this. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another, if we saw some sort of like demon type book or information book at some point here. But that actually covers everything.
That's the entire fluff in the new 8th edition manual.
Right. Or rule book, I guess.
Rule book.
Yeah. So as you can tell, like, that was not nearly as much as I think we suspected or thought might be, but or I know some of you guys might have been hoping for, but yeah, that was it. That's all the new information.
Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, it was a bit of continuing on the story, but
a little bit, but it touched on so many things that it was not really easy to follow, nor did it go into vague timelines here and there.
The timeline was problematic.
Yes.
Like I said, it seemed to indicate somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 years has passed since the Rise of the Primarch book, but it doesn't give any specifics.
And not that we want it to be spelled out, except it's not
what you wanted, basically.
Yeah.
I do know, there is they did release like an actual story or whatever alongside the release of 40K, the rulebook, which I would assume will cover
more of that.
Yeah, so, obviously for anyone more interested in what happened during that time span, that book is probably reading you will want to look into. We are not going to cover a 250 to 300 page book of fluff. That would take the better part of... That would probably take like 6 of these videos to do.
That'll take as much as longer than several 7th edition games, so...
Yeah. But, if anyone has any information from that book and wishes to share,
please,
by all means. But, yeah, I mean, let us know what you think about the direction that 40K is going with their new Fluff series. And I would expect more fluff on the, continuing the story.
I'm hoping
not
that
too far
there's
away.
Some extra fluff on some of the other...
Well, I'm sure any of the codexes and stuff like that will probably include like continuing the story and things like that. Because Games Workshop has specifically said that the story will continue advancing well into 2018. So, I would continue to expect some sort of new information coming. I think this is just sort of the
beginning, fleshing out, that kind of stuff.
Placing, showing where the universe is right now, and then from there we continue on with what's going on. But as of now, that is all we got.
Yeah.
So
if you enjoy, please like and subscribe.
Yeah, and we always appreciate the support. So until next time, guys.
Yep.
Take care.
See ya.